Hi there, this is Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this tutorial was going to show you how to paint a sunset with fisherman silhouette on an 11 by 14 inch canvas with acrylics. All of the brush sizes, colors, and any of the materials I use are in the description of this tutorial, as well as a link to the picture steps on my website. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm using an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and I am going to go ahead and apply my horizon line. So the horizon line in this painting is situated exactly in the center of the canvas. So my canvas is situated vertical in this painting, and I just estimated where the center will be, and I did a horizontal line with a T-square ruler. Next, I'm going to load my palette with the colors that I will be using in the sunset sky. So I will be using ultramarine blue, light pink, cadmium yellow medium hue, and titanium white. And I will be painting this sunset sky with a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. So we are going to start at the top with this painting, and we are going to work our way down into the water. So starting with the sky, and we are going to load our brush in a little bit of water, and we're going to kind of pat it dry. That water on the brush is going to thin the paint down just slightly, and I'm going to mix on my palette a little bit of white into that ultramarine blue so that it becomes a lighter blue. And I don't usually like to mix my colors all the way on the palette because I like to get some different tones of that color as I paint on the canvas. So I'm going to do left and right strokes starting at the top. I'm going to make the very top of my sky slightly darker with that ultramarine blue, but as I work my way down, I'm going to add a little bit of white into that. Now with this sunset, it's not going to be a gradient. I'm going to leave some space on the left and right here. So right here, I'm not painting all the way across the canvas anymore because I imagine some yellows or maybe some pinks in that area. But if you wanted it to go all the way across, all the way down, you are welcome to do that way. So as I work my way down, I'm going to add some more white into that sky. That blue is going to get super light, and I'm not going all the way across with that blue kind of in that middle of the sky right now. Next, I'm going to wipe my brush off. And I'm wiping it off because I still want a teeny bit of blue left on the brush. It's going to kind of help with this pink blending thing. So I'm going to load the light pink on the tip of my brush. I'm going to do this very carefully because if you go too fast and introduce too much pink, it's going to take over. But I'm just lightly adding that pink into the sky and blending it back up into that lighter blue. Again, I'm not going to go all the way across because I'm not creating a gradient. I kind of want some yellow to go on the sides of my sunset, but I'm just gently adding this very light pink into the sky, and it's gently blending with that lighter color. And I'm going to rinse my brush this time because I'm going to introduce yellow into my sunset. And oftentimes it's tricky to do a blue with a yellow sunset because we're trying, unless you like green in your sky, when that yellow blends with the green or blends with the blue, it's going to turn green. So we're going to do this very carefully. On the palette, I mixed a little bit of white into that yellow. And it's okay if you accidentally paint under the horizon line. But what I did was I started right there along the horizon line because that's a super bright area that I know that's where my sun is going to be, and I'm going to gently blend it up into the pink. Yellow will blend very nicely with that light pink, so I can paint over that transition area a little bit. It will create some light oranges in that sky too when the yellow mixes with the pink. And that area at the top where the blue is, where I did not paint, I'm actually going to make a very light yellow on my palette here, and I'm going to do this very carefully because I don't want this to mix with the blue to make green. That blue in this area right here, it's pretty dry, so it's not blending. And so what I'm doing is I'm very lightly holding my brush like this instead of using the full width. It's a little bit of blue in there, making some tiny amounts of green, but that's okay. Just very gently dragging that yellow into some of the blue area, And so that's how we can do blue and yellow into our sunset here. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side too. So just very lightly drag it into the color from the side of the canvas. There could be some streaks of yellow that kind of go all the way across in that area, but that makes a pretty extra color in that blue area. So it's not a gradient sunset, it's kind of more of an advanced sunset. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of add that very pale yellow to the rest of the area on the bottom left and bottom right. And if you like that light pink color, I like how that light pink looks. It makes a really pretty pale orange color. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of that light pink into the yellow area and have it kind of blend into that orange color. And if you want to paint the sides of your canvas, you can. The video does not show me painting the sides of the canvas. Next, we're going to continue our sunset color down into the water, and we're pretty much going to do the same technique with the same colors. So without even rinsing my brush, I still have that pale yellow and some pink on my brush. I grabbed some white and a little bit of yellow. I'm just kind of making a very light pinkish, yellowish, orangish color, a pale orange color, but you can adjust this if you feel like you want more yellow and less orange in your water in this area. I'm going to add a teeny bit of water to my brush just to get this paint to flow a little bit better in this area, but I am painting the water as if I was painting the sunset. So our sky is reflecting directly on the water. I'm not worried about water texture just yet. You can, if it helps, you can just pretend like you're painting the rest of the sky and you're having the sky go the rest of the way down the canvas. So our brightest part of our lake is actually right down the middle because our sun is going to be in the middle of our sky. So I'm going to make sure I have this bright yellow all down the middle, and I'll have blue in my lake on the left and right side. So I'm leaving the left and right sides of my lake open, and I'm not painting all the way across. And I'm going to make these colors slightly lighter as I work my way down. There will be a silhouette. If you look at the finished version of this painting, there's a silhouette on the bottom of the land and the trees, but don't worry about that just yet. Paint that entire area. You don't have to leave any part blank on the bottom because there's going to be land down there. So then I'm just going to have some fun and add some of this pink in there and in the far back, so there's some pink tones in there, and it's just gently blending with that yellow. I'm going to rinse my brush off here because my brush has it's overloaded with too much pink and yellow. So I'm just going to kind of get it freshened. So you can do that if you feel like your colors are all ending up the same things. You can rinse it off all the way, but I want to introduce some more golden yellow colors in the far back. So I have some white on my brush, and I'm just going to fill the rest of this with more of that golden yellow color on the left and right, and just gently drag it into that lighter pink area. You can change this if you wanted that part to be more blue from the water, or if you wanted it to be more orangish or pinkish, you can, but this is the yellow that's going all the way across that lake. And I'm going to leave the bottom left and bottom right. You can kind of see how I'm leaving that those two areas blank. Those are going to be blue. So I'm going to introduce blue into my lake. Rinse the brush off and dry it so all of that yellow is off the brush. Grab some ultramarine blue, grab some white. This ultramarine blue is a strong color, so I always like to mix the white in there to lighten it up. And the white is going to help it to blend and transition better. So the same thing I did up in the sky where I went on the right and left and just gently dragged it into the paint. That's what I'm doing here. I don't want green in my water, so I'm just being very careful to not let that blue blend with that yellow. And again, just more blue and white on my palette. Over here, same thing, using the full width of the brush here, but I'm dragging it. When I reach the middle warm colors, I'm dragging it very gently, and I'm not forcing the colors to mix. They're just kind of gently going over each other. And I'm just going to continue that technique up into the rest of the water. So full width strokes, very gently into the middle warm area. You can turn your brush on its side if you want to get some thinner strokes in there. Do not worry about water texture. Those the thin white lines we will add on the water later. And this part of the blue has a little bit more white into it. We can get creative and add a little bit of pink to our brush in this area. So let's say we want this blue to transition to this yellow here. I'm going to grab pink, which is our kind of in-between middleman color between blue and yellow. And I'm just kind of using the tip of the brush to just do some very thin strokes up in there. That part kind of looks like it has water texture already, just because I used the tip of the brush to create some thinner strokes. But very gently, that pink is blending kind of back up into the rest of the lake, making some purple tones in there. And I don't want to lose the center. The center of our water should be super bright because our sun is going to be in the middle, the bottom middle of the sky, and that's where the brightest part of our lake will be reflecting at. And we can I am just taking this purple tone that ended up on my brush and just gently making some very thin purple lines that kind of go across the middle area. I'm not pressing hard on my brush. I'm being very gentle with this color. Lots of pastels in this sunset, so you're brushing very, very gently to let that color blend with the rest, because we can end up with some muddy colors here if we press too hard or add too much pink in the wrong area or too much blue in the wrong area. So I'm done with my lake color and my sky color, and I'm going to transition and move on to the next step, and that includes painting mountains. So I'm going to rinse off my 3/4 flat brush, and I'm going to grab a new brush. I'll be using a number 8 round brush. I'll show you what that is in a second. You are going to need white and Mars Black, so titanium white, Mars Black on your palette, because we'll be making two different mountains, a gray mountain and a black mountain. So load your palette with Mars Black, load your palette with some fresh titanium white. I didn't freshen my titanium white because I'm going to use that titanium white that's on my palette already. But this is the number 8 round brush, and I'm going to grab some white. Yeah, there's a little bit of blue in that white, but that's okay. Grab some black and mix kind of a medium gray on your palette. A little bit watered down too to help with the flow, because we'll be painting a very flowy sort of line. With the tip of that round brush, I'm going to define my mountain. So this is that gray mountain that's further in the distance. So it's going to start out high and it's going to kind of wave down and go touch the horizon. This one too, it's going to start on the right, a little bit, probably about the same height. It's going to go diagonal down and it's going to meet in the middle. I want my mountains to dip down in the center because, well, I'm going to have a black mountain kind of dipping up higher than that. But my sun is going to be in the center as well. So I want to keep that in mind. And I'm just going to paint the mountains in with that light gray color. So filling it in solid. If you want to get more advanced, you can add a little bit of white on the bottom and blend it back up, because the mountains are lighter on the bottom and kind of darker at the top. But you don't have to do that. In fact, this bottom piece of the mountain is going to be hiding because we'll be doing a black mountain in front of it. But I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of this in. I'm adding a little bit of white onto the brush and blending it up into the gray. You want to try not to go below your horizon line, although if you have some gray streaks kind of dipping under, that's okay. It could just be that mountain reflecting into the water in that area. And I'm not even going to rinse my brush when I do this darker mountain, because all that black is just going to take over anyway. But if you need to rinse your brush because you got too much paint, that's okay. So we're going to define our next mountain area, and this piece is going to start below our gray mountain, but then it's going to dip higher, because it's going to have it's going to be its own thing. So we don't want to copy the other mountain. So I did that one higher, and I'm just going to fill the rest of it in solid black. If you want to make the bottom part of your mountain slightly lighter, you can. Mine is kind of naturally doing that anyway, because some of that gray on my brush is seeping through and kind of mixing in with it on the bottom. But I'm just filling the rest of this mountain in, making sure that that bottom part of our mountain is nice and defined. If you really want that bottom piece to be nice and sharp, you can add a little bit of water to your brush to get that to be really flowy down there. and just go in there and paint your horizontal line all the way across. But it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, that mountain could be reflecting in the water a little bit, so it's not exactly a horizontal line. It can be kind of a wavy line if it needed to be. And that is it for the mountains. We are going to transition to the next step. I will be demonstrating how to do the sun. I did the sun in two parts and I used my index finger to paint the sun. So we're going to use our finger, our pointer finger, and load our finger in some yellow paint. Not too much paint, so you see me kind of wiping it on the palette there, and just take your finger and form a circle and kind of smear it outwards. This is going to be the yellow glow of the sun. It's not going to be the brightest part of our sun. So you're going to make a circle shape, and because you smeared that yellow outwards, it kind of fades off into the rest of the sky. You can wipe your finger off or use a different finger, and grab some white. Wipe it off on the palette a little bit. Actually, there's still yellow on my finger and a little bit of white. So this white, we're not trying to make it super bright. We're just trying to make it kind of the next tint or the next lighter part up from that yellow. Start in the middle, kind of smear it outwards, and it should be a very light yellow in the middle, but it's super bright. I used a different finger that time, but just a little bit of white. That was a little bit too much, but I'm taking that, kind of smearing it outwards, forming the circle, so that bright white yellowish part is the sun. And when this dries, I'll add another brighter white piece, but for now we're going to let that dry and move on to the next step. So the next step I'm going to show you are the clouds, and for these clouds I used a bright brush. I used a number 4 bright brush. I loaded it into the water, and on my palette, patted it dry, so not much water on the brush. On my palette, I'm going to make a grayish, bluish, purplish color. This is going to be my darkest part of the clouds. If you look at the clouds at the final result, they're gray clouds, but they have some sunset colors in them as well. So we're going to start with our darkest part of our cloud, and just mixing in a grayish, bluish color with the blue and the pink and a little bit of black, and then wipe it off with the towel. So one trick I find with painting these clouds is to wipe off your brush, because too much paint on the brush is going to not create this effect. So I'm painting in circular strokes using just the tip of the brush to form the shape of this cloud. So if you imagine the cloud's kind of fluffy at the top, it's got some fluffiness on the bottom as well, and it creates a shape. And the clouds that are higher in the sky are larger. Clouds that are lower in the sky are smaller. And because this is pretty much a dry brush style, because I wiped off paint off my brush, we can see through the clouds. So we have some sky color still showing through. There, it's not completely opaque. Remember, we wiped the brush off, so there shouldn't be a lot of paint on that brush. So this one's cloud's going to be kind of a different shape. This one's smaller because it's lower, and you can do as many clouds as you want. I'm going to do 5 clouds, and then that will be it. This is our first layer. It's our darkest layer of cloud, and we are going to do our next layer, which is a yellow. Instead of rinsing, I'm just going to wipe that gray off my brush. It's okay if there's still gray on the brush and it ends up mixing with this yellow. So I'm going to do a little bit of yellow, teeny bit of white. We don't want it to be super bright because this isn't our brightest layer. It's kind of our in-between layer. But this is a sunset, and this color will be, this yellow will be reflecting in these clouds. So this is a very kind of dull yellow because that gray on my brush is mixing with it. But I'm just going to paint yellow, but I'm not covering all my gray. I'm just doing the bottom part of my gray because the light from the sunset will be reflecting onto the bottom parts of the clouds, not the top part, but the bottom. So I'm just kind of gently adding that yellow only to the bottom parts of the clouds. If you do your stroke and it's too much, just make sure you have your towel handy and just kind of wipe it off. And I'm only doing this to bottom parts of the clouds. Little circular strokes, not trying to cover all my gray. Then I'm going to do my third layer, which is going to be a brighter yellow. So I'm going to grab more yellow, a little bit more white so it's nice and super bright. Just a little bit on the tip of your brush, and we're just painting very, very small circular strokes, again, only on the bottom of our clouds. So the part where that bright sun will be hitting the bottom parts of those clouds with that super, super bright color. And we're not trying to cover up all our yellow. We're just adding little tiny bits of that bright yellow on the bottom parts of our clouds. So you're still doing little tiny dab circular strokes with the tip of your brush. And then we could even go in and do a pure white in the cloud. So let's wipe our brush off. We just want to be really careful with this. Only a teeny tiny bit of titanium white. There's like barely any on that tip of the corner of my brush. And adding just a few dots of that super bright white is going to make it look like parts of those clouds are glowing with the sunset. I'm going to add some more of that white color to the tip of my brush and just go in there and add a few little dots, a little bit more areas of the brighter white. Love how that looks with the rest of the sunset. You can see how that dark cloud contrasts with the light part of the cloud. And then we're going to, or I'm going to do another layer of sun here with my index finger with just white because I want that sun to be super, super bright. And I'm just going to kind of gently smear it outwards. So now we have a super bright sun in our sky. The next step involves, this step is super easy, but we are going to do our land on the bottom. So we have a land area that is kind of a pointed looking hill on the bottom, and we'll be using our number 8 round brush, Mars Black, watered down slightly. Watering Mars Black down a little bit really helps to when we paint, especially these silhouettes here. So I'm just going to take my brush and define what I want that land area to look like. So I'm making a hill that's kind of pointed in the middle. It's not exactly right in the center, it's kind of off-centered towards the right. And then I'm just going to paint it in solid black. So the rest of that hill from that line all the way down to the canvas is a solid black. Don't worry about the texture of the grass and don't worry about those trees yet. Just paint it all the way to the bottom. The next thing you'll need is a smaller round brush. I'm going to grab my number 4 round brush out of this pack and rinse my 8 round brush off. With this number 4 round brush, we'll be doing the grass texture. So you need water and you need to pinch it so that your bristles go to a nice point. We're going to load our number 4 round brush in a little bit of that black, and it should be kind of flowy, so a little bit of water in that black, kind of twist it and practice it on your palette. So we're gonna use just the tip of the brush to create that thin line, but I'm kind of just flicking the brush. So you're flicking the brush super fast with just the tip, and you can practice that on your palette before you apply it to your canvas. And when you feel comfortable with it, you can go ahead and paint it on your canvas, but you're just doing short, fast strokes with just the tip of the brush. I'm going to start below my silhouette and I'm going to flick my brush upwards super fast, creating those thin lines that are going to represent the grass or the cattails that are along the lake. And it's just kind of all going in different angular directions. You can make them go in clusters. You can have some that are higher, some that are lower to create variety. And you're just going to do that all along the silhouette line or silhouette land area on the bottom. If you'll be doing trees in this painting, don't worry about where the trees are going to be just yet. And that bottom left corner got cut off from the video a bit, but I'm basically just doing the exact same thing that I did on the top of the hill, doing the short strokes, flicking my brush super fast to create the grassy pointed lines, and like I said, I'm just doing that all the way across my land area. Right here in the middle, I'm going to purposely make about 5 lines that are bigger, taller, and then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to do a little tiny oval on the ends of the lines. I'm sorry, I did 4 of them, 4 cattails. 5, we'll do 5 here. 6, do as many as you want. I like how that looks. So do just a bunch of little oval shapes on some of those lines. I don't think it would look good if you did ovals on every single one of those grass lines. It would look way too busy, but it looks nice just to have a cluster of cattails right there off-centered. Next, I'm going to demonstrate how to do the water texture, the water lines, and I'm going to do this with an angle brush. If you want to do this with the round brush, you can if you don't like using the angle brush. I'm going to load it in titanium white, get that paint right there on the tip of the brush, and I'm going to hold my angle brush so the bristles are going horizontally, and I want to start in the middle. This middle part of our lake under the sun is super bright white and has a high concentration of white horizontal lines. So I'm just kind of staggering these lines. Ideally, you want your lines to be longer, further down the canvas, but kind of shorter, further in the distance. That'll create some depth in your water. You can add a little bit of yellow in there, although that yellow is not showing up as bright by mixing yellow with that white. So I'm going to add a little bit more white to my palette here, or my brush here. And then we're going to add some white water lines all throughout, but they're not going to be as concentrated as the middle. So these white horizontal lines are longer on the bottom. They're going to get kind of shorter as we go in the distance, although it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all the way short and all the way long on the bottom. You can do a variety. And I'm just going to continue this concept of these white horizontal lines all throughout. Remember, the center part under the sun should have a higher concentration of those white lines. I'm going in here and adding extra white right there to the center, and it's going to create a vertical area all the way down the lake area. Don't worry about where your fisherman will be. It will be overlapping whatever part of the lake he's going to end up at. This is a lovely painting as it is. If you wanted to simplify this design and not do the fan brush trees and not do the fisherman silhouette boat, if you like it how it is, the design can work as a standalone lake sunset painting. So that is a choice that you can make. But this next step, I will be demonstrating how to do these fun fan brush trees. So I have my number 4 fan brush and load some fresh Mars Black. I always dip my fan brush in the water first because the water is really going to help. I double dip it. So I dip it in the water, spread it into that paint, dip it in the water again, spread it into that paint, loading it like I'm raking the paint. But you want to make sure your bristles are all spread out. So you don't want your fan brush to look like it's all clumped together. So you kind of brush the paint on the palette. Hold it at an angle and make a mark. That's where the top of my tree is. Hold it at an angle to create your smaller, and I promise my fingers will move out of the way here, but I'm just tapping the angle part of the brush. I'm not using the full width here yet until I get to about right here. Then I can start using the full width, and I'm just gently tapping it. My tree is going to look very bare at first. I'm really focusing on getting the shape of the tree in first and not filling it in. So I'm doing zigzag tap strokes going left and right. My tree is getting larger as I work my way down, so it's getting wider on the bottom. And my end game point here is the bottom of the land silhouette, so it's all going to kind of mesh together right there on the bottom. So I have my bare tree, but I have my shape in, and then I can go in and I can fill it up more. So I just loaded my brush in a little bit more black, and I'm going back over that with a second coat, and you can see right away what happens. It fills it in, makes it more bushier. You want to make sure every time you load that brush that you're making sure your paint is mostly on the tip of the brush, so that because that's where our paint is going. And I'm just making sure this bottom part is nice and bushy, and it kind of just, it will overlap your grass, and that's okay. You can make it even more bushier, but I like how a lot of that water is showing through the tree, so I didn't want to get rid of that color in there. I'm going to repeat this step and make a shorter tree. Again, load your brush, turn it on its side to make the top point of the tree. And then this one's kind of one of those awkward trees that hangs off the side of the canvas. So you're doing tap, tap, left and right, forming the shape of the tree. I'm trying to get it small, not as wide as the first one, but it's ending up being kind of a wide tree. Again, I want a lot of my water still showing through because I don't want to lose the color in that area, and the contrast, it really creates some nice contrast, having some of that color show through the black. So just kind of making this one filled in just a little bit more. I'm going to actually take my trees a step further. I like doing this only because sometimes I just like to make it more advanced, but you don't have to do this. But I'm going to add another layer to the tree and make it a little bit lighter by adding some white to my brush. So I'm going to grab, you can rinse it off if you want, but just grabbing a little bit of white and kind of brushing it off is going to make gray. I'm not trying to paint snow. I'm just adding a gray layer to my tree, and it gives our tree a little bit more depth. And I'm not doing as many branches with that gray color, just a few, just enough to make it look like that tree's not flat, gives it some depth. The next thing I'm going to do is draw our fisherman. So there is a link to a template if you don't want to draw him, but I am going to draw him. And we're going to just start with a pencil. Use a pencil to draw lightly because you can erase, and this area is super dry. So if I needed to erase, it's not going to mess the paint up. I'm lightly sketching his boat he's in, so I'm drawing a boat shape that kind of dips down in the center and points. It's going to eventually have a motor on the back of the boat. And then this man is situated inside the boat. So we're trying to be as simple as possible here because it is a silhouette, so we're not going to see very many details. So we have his body and a little circle for his head. He's going to have a hat on, so I could draw the little hat on his head. Hat covers the top part of his head, and the bill from the hat sticks out forward. We have his hand or his arm facing forward, and we have the angle of our fishing pole. I'm going to have this angle kind of be a little bit lower. And so you can change this. You can even have it look like he actually caught a fish. You can have your fishing line kind of swirl out with a fish on it, but I wanted to keep it a little bit more simple. And you have your fishing line. If you Google fisherman silhouettes, you'll see a lot of different ones in there. If you wanted to kind of change something with this one. And I'm just kind of going over my drawing here. When we paint this in, we can adjust it as well. But I'm just making it a little bit darker so you can see. I'm going to make my boat a little bit shorter too. So we have our motor on the end of the boat. Fishing pole, fishing line. I'm just going over my lines. And then our boat would be reflecting in the water a little bit, so I did a few water lines. I'm actually going to make my boat shorter, so I wanted it to be not as long, and so I shortened it a bit and redid the little motor in there. And then when you're comfortable with your drawing part, or not comfortable, it may look better when you paint it in. You can go ahead and paint it in a solid black. So I'm using my number 4 round brush and a little bit of watered down Mars Black. I'm going to start with the boat, the easy part. And I'm just going to paint that in. Again, our drawing does not have to be filled in solid. We can adjust the shape as we start painting it in. I'm just going to paint that in solid. If your number 4 round is too big for this area, you can find a smaller round brush, or you can even use a black paint pen for this step. Some of my reflection from the boat is painted in with the black, so some water lines, loose sort of zigzag lines right under the boat. And painting the man in, just taking this very, very carefully, very, very steady hand because it's a small area. He's got a small head. His hat is really small. We can always adjust this later. So if you mess up, you can wait for that to dry and then you get your white and kind of go back over it, paint the lake again and have at it again. And then he's got his arm holding that fishing rod. The nice thing about silhouettes is they can easily be adjusted and we don't need to see the details. We don't see his eyes, we don't see his hair color, it's just a shadow. And that's okay. We don't have to be too specific on details, and it can look a little abstract too. The line of the fishing pole is going to be white instead of black. So I didn't paint that line in yet. We'll give our motor a little bit more form here and then have it kind of reflect in the water a bit. I'm going to rinse my brush and load it into titanium white, so the line of the fishing pole will be the white. When this dries, I'll also erase the pencil line, so don't worry if you're not painting over all your pencil lines. So just a very, very thin white line down into the water. Now you don't have to do this. When I do silhouettes, I like to kind of take my white and accent some of my shadow silhouettes. I'm going to start in the water and do some white lines in that area, but then I'm gonna kind of take some white and add a little bit to the boat, maybe on his back. Sometimes if you do too much, it really takes over too much of the silhouette, and then I just go back and cover the white again. Like his hat, that was a little bit too much right there, so I'm just going back over that, kind of covering it, but I'll leave some of that white on the top of the boat. And then, like I said, when it's dry, you can erase it, but don't erase it until your painting is dry all the way. And then after that, if you need to do touch-ups, you can go back in there gently with white or yellow and just kind of touch up the outer part, the negative space around the shadow if you need to. But I'm going in here and I'm actually adding some more white water lines in there to brighten up this area of the lake. So you can tell the painting's almost finished. So all I'm doing is just a few touch-ups here and there with my silhouette, and I'll be doing some touch-ups of water lines in the lake itself. Make his head a little bit more rounded. Adding some white to the fishing pole, just a teeny tiny bit right there, and then I'm going to have my fishing line kind of bow down a little bit more into the lake. Add a little bit more white to the edge of the boat. Again, these are just extra details you don't have to do. You don't have to add white to your silhouette. You can just leave it all black if you want. And just some more water lines. The next thing I'm going to do is paint these birds way in the distance, and I'm feeling extra brave. I'm going to use my 8 round brush for this, but it's got a nice point to it. You can see already how tiny those lines get with that 8 round brush just by using the point. But I'm just doing black, and I'm doing regular M style birds, so just the wings that kind of go down to a point in the center. Very, very small in the distance. If you want to make larger ones kind of higher up, you can, but I did 5 birds just around the sun. And the last thing I'm going to do to this painting, you can see I already signed it on the lower left, but I was finished, and then I came back to it and noticed, okay, there's too much solid yellow in this area. I wanted to add some blue water lines in this area. So I'm using the angle brush and the ultra mixed with the white. So not pure ultra, that'd be too dark, just mix it with the white, so that lighter blue. Doing some blue water lines here. It really kind of helps that yellow blend in with the rest. Not blend, but look like it transitions well with the blue and the water and the reflections. Just kind of adds a nice little touch to it. This painting is coming to its conclusion. This was such a super relaxing design. I love the idea of the fisherman silhouette. I don't have any fishing style paintings. I have a few fish, but not someone fishing. And I have a lot of lake paintings, but I like the combination of the fisherman silhouette with the beautiful sunset. When I see this painting, I kind of think of a dedication to my grandfather who loved fishing. So it's kind of like he's fishing up in heaven now. So that's kind of how I interpret the painting. But of course, you can interpret it your own way too. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.